Episode 37 this week, Friday's Child. Friday's Child, the name of the episode. This one was all over the place. I don't think the episode knew what it wanted to do. Was it a ha-ha funny one? Was it a serious one? They didn't know. It was all over the map. So they start out, Dr. McCoy's giving the senior officers a briefing on the inhabitants of this planet, Cabela 4. He was stationed there for a few months. He said that they didn't want medical help or aid. Why it took him months to figure that out, he didn't say. Just said he was there for months, so he knew all about these people. But yet they didn't want medical help or aid. So why was a doctor stationed there for months? Never explained. He said they had this weapon that was as accurate as a phaser. It was basically like a slingshot crossed with a boomerang. It was a weird thing. But he said that was a dangerous one. He also said most of them were around 7 feet tall. Yet in the episode, none of them were. They were all maybe 6'1", 6'2". Clearly not 7 feet tall. But Captain Kirk takes Spock and McCoy and a security officer with him, tells Scotty he's in charge of the ship and to be on the lookout for Klingons because they've seen them around this planet lately. Why they were not on alert already, they didn't say. But Kirk's landing party goes down there. McCoy's trying to greet the inhabitants because they have a lot of protocols. Off and on through the episode, they would have strict protocols and then they wouldn't. They didn't follow a strict path with that. But the security officer spots a Klingon. He's like, a Klingon, pulls his phaser. One of the Cabelans kills the security officer. Kirk's at a loss. The Klingon's like, well, I was just innocently trying to get the lithium crystals, just like those guys were. And Kirk's like, but he's a Klingon, he's bad. And Klingon was like, so how do you know he's not bad? The Cabelan was like, well, the Klingon gave me all of his devices, give me yours. Kirk very reluctantly finally did. He didn't want to, but he finally did. He's like, let me call my ship. And the Klingon was like, why? So he can shoot at the Cabelans? And he was like, no. And the guy was like, how do we know that? And Kirk was like, uh-oh. But he hands over his communicators and his phasers. They almost break a bunch more protocols when the Tier had a meeting with everyone. The Tier is basically like their version of a king, or more like a prime minister, kind of a combination of rulers. He took a young wife so he could have an heir, apparently. She was expecting any time. She couldn't be touched, so Kirk almost helped her when she started to slip at one point. McCoy, every time Kirk started to break a protocol, would scream, Jim! And he'd be all freaked out. But the Cabelans didn't seem to follow closely their own protocols half the time. But the guy that was next in line, apparently to rule this planet, he didn't like the guy that was in charge. There was a big fight out of nowhere. Then all of a sudden there's just a fight scene. And they're in the middle of the fight scene. They're brawling all over the place. The ruler gets killed. So the other guy takes over. He's going to kill the wife and unborn baby because of the protocols, apparently. She was all for it. She's like, yeah, that's what we're supposed to do. So, I'm fine with it. Kirk starts fighting. They take him over. They throw him in a tent. They use a Three Stooges-esque plot to get out of there. The old McCoy's like, well, they can only kill me once for checking this girl's arm. So when he goes to check the girl, they rush the guard. It was easy, ridiculously easy. So they hightail it into the mountains. And they're in this, mountainous area. Spock's like, well, they can't get to us here. And then McCoy finds out that the girl's on the verge of giving birth. But she doesn't want any help. She doesn't want him to touch her. They end up slapping each other hard, over and over. McCoy then becomes the one person she'll allow to touch her. Spock keeps trying to help her through the mountains. She won't let him. And she almost kept slipping on his sword that he had in his hand. It was dangerous. Baby comes, and, well, McCoy's sleeping after the baby had been delivered because he'd had a rough night delivering the baby. She hit him with a rock and fled. McCoy's like, well, oops. So he tells Kirk and Spock, and he's like, I'll go fight with you. And Kirk's like, the baby. And McCoy's like, oh yeah, I forgot. So we had to watch the baby. Kirk and Spock made bows and arrows, and he said that they'd be as successful as gunpowder because this planet didn't have bows and arrows. He forgot they had the boomerang type of deal that was as accurate as a phaser, supposedly. But when the warriors come, they walking up to them, and Kirk and Spock use their communicators to create a sonic boom which created an avalanche. An avalanche using communicators. It was a little odd, but they did it. Then the Klingon rushed for the phaser that one of the guards had on him. Killed him for no reason, just stabbed him and took the phaser. The guy was already injured. They're shooting back and forth. Arrows, phaser fire. The broad was going to sacrifice herself, and then the new tier said, no, I'll do it. So he's like, shoot me. So the Klingon shot him, and then Kirk shot him with an arrow, and eventually they took the Klingon out. Then McCoy comes walking up with the baby, like he forgot there was a battle going on. Didn't see the battle. He's just walking up there with a newborn baby, like nothing was happening around him. It was a little bit odd. They get back to the ship, and Scotty, who had been diverted because he got a distress call, so he had to go check that out. That's why he couldn't save Captain Kirk right away. They were checking out this distress call that was faked by the Klingon ship. They get a second distress call, and he ignored it. Why he didn't ignore the first one, no one's to say. He even knew what it was. He was like, they called us by name. They wouldn't have known we were here. They wouldn't have known we were specifically here. Why didn't he do that in the first place? But they get back aboard the ship, everything's fine. And then McCoy says, well, they named the baby James Leonard Akaka. And Spock was flabbergasted. Huge amounts of emotion pouring out of him when he heard that. That was their funny ha-ha moment as they wrapped the episode. Some interesting notes. Pretty much all the regulars were in it. All of them had a good amount of lines in this episode. Everybody was kind of featured. Sulu didn't have a ton, but he was in there, had some speaking parts. Chekhov took over Spock's station. He was in there. Uhura had a good amount of time. Scott was in charge of the ship. And the person playing the lady that gave birth, Julie Newmar from Batman. She was Catwoman. And here she was popping up on Star Trek, giving birth and slapping McCoy in the face. Well, that's pretty much episode 37.